So welcome to lesson 1, which we're going to be looking at effective communication and in particular a model called transactional analysis. So transactional analysis is actually a psychological framework. It's used to analyze and understand human behavior, communication and relationships. It's used in many different sectors, so it's not just in leadership development that you would find this model. I know that it's often used in therapy and psychotherapy, and different forms of counselling as well. The reason why it's used in a plethora of different places is that the model actually gets us, first of all, to look at ourselves. And I find that super interesting when we're talking about communication, because it's not about you, it's about the other person. So the model was developed by Dr. Berne in the 1950s. He was originally trained in psychoanalysis, but he wanted a theory that could be understood and available to everyone. So not just really clever scientific psychotherapists, but something that could be made simple so that everybody could understand it, therefore everybody could improve their communication. But Dr. Berne had a real philosophy that he also wanted to keep to. So his philosophy was that TA, or transactional analysis, is underpinned by the philosophy that people can change and we all have a right to be in the world and to be accepted. So let's break this down a little bit more, and I'll explain to you a little bit about how we start to understand the beginnings of the model of transactional analysis. So what Berne did was he created the concept of ego states to be able to explain how we're made up and how we relate to others. So don't worry too much about focusing on the word ego. It is slightly linked, but it's how the model actually refers to the different state that we're in when we are communicating. And by ego state, what it refers to is feelings, thinking, and behaviors. So the transactional analysis model looks at 3 different ego states, and they're referred to as parent, adult, and child. And they categorize or tell us the ways that we think, feel, and behave. So a parent ego state is a set of feelings or thinking or behaviors that we typically have copied from our parents, or if we didn't have parents in our lives, parent figures or significant others. So as we grow up, we are constantly, or children are constantly taking in ideas and beliefs and feelings from our parents or our caretakers. When we do this, it's actually called introjecting. And it's just if we kind of take in the whole of the caregiver. So, for example, we may notice things that we're saying, just like our father or mother or grandmother or school teacher used to. Some people don't take that very well. I know when people have commented, oh, you sound just like your mother. Maybe it's not something that you want to hear. Maybe it is something that you want to hear because it makes you feel very maternal, but it's what we're doing is we're copying. We are copying or reproducing certain things that were said to us, or treating others how we may have been treated. Okay. When we look at an adult ego state, the adult ego state is about the direct response to here and now. So rather than thinking about something that we maybe have picked up in the past in terms of what our parent ego state was, the adult state is, no, I am seeing people as they are rather than what we project on them. So we don't make any assumptions and we don't look or play any tapes from the past. We focus on what the here and now is. If we look at a child ego state, this is a set of thoughts and feelings and behaviors which are replayed from our own childhood. So, for example, perhaps maybe the boss calls us into the office and we immediately get like a churning in our stomach, or we go, what have I done wrong? And if we explored this, we might remember that maybe a head teacher called us into the office. So, and we're replaying that tape. We're just replaying that tape. So not everything in child ego state is negative and is fearful, by the way. You can get some lovely warm memories, or you may communicate in a certain way, actually, that might give you some feelings of feeling nurtured or feeling looked after. But essentially, again, just like parent, you are looking back. The ego state is looking back at things that have happened in the past, whereas adult is the here and now. We focus on the here and now. So where do we need to be and where should we be in terms of effective communication? So what I will say is that you will hang out in all of these spaces. Sometimes in a 10-minute conversation, we can flick all over to parent, adult, child, back to parent, back to adult, back to child, back to adult. So, and that's pretty normal. Where we strive to be in the workplace is in adult, because what we want to do is we want to think things through and be rational. We want balance and perspective on the conversations and the interactions that we're having. We want to be attentive and interested and non-threatening. So we want to come from a safe space. And some of those behaviors might look like we would ask clarification questions. We'd be listening so that we can seek to understand. If we are in an adult ego state, you quite often would, and it's called hooking the adult, hook another adult to remain in that adult ego state. So typically what happens is you're having an adult to adult conversation. Adult to adult conversations are productive, they're respectful, they build trust, they build relationships. You're able to give feedback, you're able to manage conflict, because we are in a ego state of respect and understanding and, like I say, in the current, in the here and now. Let's start with parent ego state and what that might look like. So there are two different parent ego states. One of them we call controlling parent, and the other one we call nurturing parent, sometimes also known as caring parent, depending on who's written the article or where you're looking. So it's controlling parent, nurturing or caring parent. So what might we be seeing or hearing if we are watching someone that's in a controlling parent ego state? Well, they could be quite directive, they could be quite critical. You also might hear them being a bit patronizing. You may hear some behaviors that might be angry or gestures that could be a bit finger pointy. They come from a place where it's quite a one-way conversation as well. So if you're in controlling parent, it's typically more do as I say, and can be quite directive. Where it can be useful for providing structure and direction, but you don't want to hang out in controlling parent a lot of the time. You may know someone that feels like they're in controlling parent quite a lot of the time, and you may know or recognize the feelings that gives you. If you're being spoken to by someone that can feel quite directive or critical or patronizing. I'll talk to you about how that looks in a second. If we move on to nurturing parents, so nurturing parents are caring, supporting, they're encouraging. Their behaviors may be non-confrontational, but feeling quite protective. In the workplace, what that might be, how that might play out is that someone will say, I'll do that for you, I'll pick that up for you. They may not delegate effectively because they may not want to put too much workload onto people, or they may be like, my door is always open, come and see me. I did actually hear one time when I was running a training session, there was a regional manager in the room, and it was a female, and she openly said, oh, I'm like the mum in my area. She goes, I look after everybody. And I actually, after I'd finished the session, kind of had a little chat with her, and I said, do you think that leadership style is effective? She said, well, yeah, I'm just very caring, I'll make sure that everyone's okay. Anyway, we unpicked it and we decided that actually what she was creating by being very nurturing parent was her team were acting in the child ego state. because she was the mother figure. She would pick everything up. She'd make sure everyone was okay. There was two things happening within her team. One is people weren't thinking for themselves. They were constantly going to her for reassurance, checking in. Is it okay if I do this? And they were all very, very capable people, as was she. And the second thing it was created more workload for her, because she typically, because they weren't autonomous, or there was a lot of checking, and it came from a great place, by the way. It wasn't a negative place. She wasn't micromanaging. She was trying to take care of everybody, but her workload was unmanageable. So it can come from a good place, but quite often it's about finding that right balance. So it can also come across as overprotective and smothering. If you're a person that doesn't like to be checked up on or likes to have autonomy, if that's the style of leadership that is your line manager is, it can feel quite suffocating. If we have a leader, or if we see a leader that's in either of the parent ego states, what that's going to create is the reaction or the interaction from the other person. You might typically push them into child. So we have this kind of interaction or reaction to controlling parent might go into rebellious child. If someone's directive and critical and patronizing, it may spark something in us. So we have an emotional response. So if you have a controlling parent style of leadership, you might find that you have some rebellious, or free, as it's called, child behaviors within your team. Now, here's where I get asked a lot of questions. If I speak to people who have quite a controlling parent style, they will tell me that, well, I have to be like that with them because they're uncooperative and they don't do as I say, and they react quite, or they're quite emotional, or they're quite volatile. If you then go and speak to the staff members who may have a rebellious or free child, and you say, okay, so where's this behavior coming from? Well, I don't like to be told what to do. I'm sick of being controlled. I want to be able to make some of my own decisions. You can see where this is going. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but actually one will drive the other. So controlling parents might have those leadership, quite controlling leadership style, will create a emotional response from the rebellious child. Controlling parents says this is okay because this is how I have to control an emotional rebellious child. And rebellious child will keep doing it because that's how they've been spoken to or communicated with. And what you have then, or what you can create is that's the relationship. Because if the communication style continues over time, that becomes a relationship. So you may be sat there thinking, well, yes, actually, I can recognize this. How does it happen with adapted child? So with adapted child, they can still have emotional responses, but their behaviors might be cooperative. So they might be quite eager to please and quite spontaneous, but they may not challenge or question. So, but if you have a controlling parent, they also could be creating an adaptive child, or compliant child, it's sometimes called as well, because the controlling parent will tell the person what to do, and then they'll just continue to do it. And that can actually be quite a comfortable, still a positive relationship, but not positive if we want to be an adult. But it does, again, like I say, it's not coming from a place of command and control. It's a style, but there might be in that relationship. So one person gives the orders, the other person just does as they're told. With nurturing parent, you can also have the same. So with nurturing parent, you might get someone that's very caring, and then that will create a compliant child because you have a codependent relationship there. And nurturing parent style can also create rebellious child behaviors, because if you're a nurturing parent, you could be mollycoddling or over fussing or trying to take control, and that might not be right for everybody, so they could rebel against that. So where we need to be is trying ourselves as leaders to spend as much time as possible in the adult ego state. What's really difficult to do is to interact with someone that's in an adult ego state if you're in any of the other ego states. So you may start a conversation and you know someone's in rebellious child, but if you remain in adult, what happens is you will bring them up. And like I say, it's called hooking their adults. That's the phrase that we use, because what you're doing is you're trying to get them to match your behavior. Then you can start to have brilliant adult to adult conversations.